3rd, 2023 NDCAP meeting. I'm going to start off with the roll call of the members in attendance tonight. We'll start all the way to my left with Mr. Dave Nichols.
David Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker.
Seth Pickering, designated EOEEA Secretary.
Andrew Gottlieb, appointed by Governor Baker.
Mary Lampert, appointed by the Senate President.
John Mahoney, Plymouth Select Board designee.
Pine Dubois, Speaker of the House.
Mary Gatzlick, Minority Leader, appointed by.
Jim Lambert, appointed by the Speaker of the House. Mike Fortini, appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
John Moylan, Site Vice President Holter.
Dave Noyes, Compliance Manager, HDI.
Looking up at the screen, I see Mr. Priest.
Jack Priest, appointed by the Commissioner, Department of Public Health.
And John Rivera.
John, you next.
John Viveros.
John Viveros. Just weigh in.
Good evening, John Viveras, appointed by the Secretary of Public Safety.
And then I don't know if
That's Henrietta Constantine.
Henrietta Constantino out there? Oh, I see a second from the...
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am here. I do not know how to put on the visual. It doesn't seem to have a button for that. So I appear to be in disguise, but I'm behind the H.
Henrietta, did you receive a link from PAC TV?
Yes, I did.
Then use that link, because you've got the wrong... No, no, I think you used the public link. And that's why you don't have video.
I used the one that came from PAC TV, but I'll go back and try another.
Yeah, if you give it a try again, you might be able to get video, okay?
Okay.
Hi, fine. It's John Viveras. I just want to confirm that folks were able to hear me on the roll call.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, moving on. I think that's everyone in attendance. Moving on to previous minutes, review and approval. Anyone have any concerns with respect to the minutes from the late November meeting, 2022?
Give me the pasta.
I sent out some attendees changes, that was it.
John, I want to comment. I think who's ever doing the minutes is doing an exceptional job.
That's coming from the Energy and Environmental Affairs Office. Tori Kim is leading it. I think she might be getting somebody else to look at the video.
No, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? John Viveros, you're in affirmative?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Looks like, Pine, looks like unanimous. All right, we're moving on to the next agenda item, and this is just something that obviously should have taken part last July after the turn of the new year, when we come into the fiscal year, which traditionally boards reorg, but for various reasons that never occurred here, so there's an opportunity here to nominate a chair and a vice chair. So I'll take nominations for chair.
Frankly, John.
Yes.
I think perhaps it might be appropriate to postpone unless the current vice chair has been officially re-upped. I know the draft minutes said that it was decided that a policy of holdovers had been decided upon. And that I do not believe is correct. I know, I personally have spoken to our town manager, who said she couldn't imagine that that was the case.
Referencing Duxbury Town Manager.
Well, it's just all town manager, but that's town. Then I called and then wrote to the Attorney General's office, to the Secretary of State's office, and to some legislators. And I think it would be appropriate to hear back so we know in fact what the policy is. I know Jack Priest has been reappointed in November and would love to have everybody officially reappointed. But so far, we don't have a definitive answer. So I am not comfortable for anybody being nominated, not that I know, who has not officially been re-upped for a couple of years. And so I think rather than appoint somebody and then find that that was inappropriate and starting all over again, if we've waited since July, we could do one of two things. We could wait another month, or we could appoint somebody who we know definitively has been appointed appropriately to the panel. That is just, that's my feeling.
Do you want to make a motion to table this to a future date?
Well, does anyone else have any comment on this?
I would just make one comment. Excuse me, my voice is not particularly great tonight. This issue has unfortunately been hanging out there for 6 months. We talked about it in July. At that stage, there were 3 members of this panel who, based on the information I had been appointed to the panel, what I will call in its early days, more than the 4 years ago that the statute provides for how long you sit here. Those were Jack Priest, Dave Nichols, and Pine DeWa. Since that time, Jack Priest has been reappointed. Dave, I don't know whether you're still hung up in the governor's office or not. He appointed a lot of people, but I have no idea whether you were one of the 3.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything different from the former governor or the new governor.
Yeah, and my understanding from emails I've had going back and forth with Pine, I think I referred to this being in the mill for 6 months, and her response was, by now it's all ground up and lying somewhere on the floor.
Ground up and lying somewhere on the floor, excuse me?
That's basically, you said this was all ground up. And
I didn't say that.
That's roughly what you said.
No, I did not say that. Stop
Well,
putting
it's
words in my
irrelevant.
mouth.
I'm not Pine.
Okay.
All right, Jim, continue.
Yeah, basically, John, who was just nominated for chair, is clearly eligible. I see no problem at all with voting on, voting on whether he should be reelected chair. The situation I would hate for us to end up in is sometime down the pike, and hopefully this damn thing will get itself straightened out soon enough, something from the Attorney General that says the person you elected X isn't a member. I'd really like to avoid that, so I think delaying putting it off, the vice chair off until July in hopes this, I'll call it nonsense, straightens itself out would be a good idea, but I see no reason, and I've been counting how many people are here and how many votes are necessary to elect people. John, a vote to appoint John, if it approaches unanimity, is clearly proper, and he has properly been appointed to the panel.
So
because there was.
I discussed this issue a few months ago with the Plymouth town manager, and his opinion was that was the opposite of what you may have gotten from the Duxbury town manager, was that and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you would just continue business as usual until the state followed through on what they were required to do with respect to appointments. And then the second thing I would add to the discussion is that in a couple of agenda items from now, I'm sorry, the very next agenda item is that we're getting a legislative update from Rep. Lenatra, Rep. Muratori, and Senator Moran, and I think they're going to enlighten the commission to potential remedies with respect to these issues that we've been challenged with in the last 6 to 18 months with respect to membership.
We really need to get this settled.
Right.
Yeah, I think we have to get it straight. And finally, I wrote official letters to the AG's office, the Secretary of State's office, as legislators. I thought that was a good start, and I would hope that there would be a response and we'd know where we're at.
I would welcome a motion to table this until a future day, a future meeting.
So moved.
So moved. Oh, no, I have to make the motion.
He made the motion.
Oh, he made the motion, second.
Any discussion on tabling the reorg of this committee until a future? Okay, I'll take a vote now. All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? John, how did you vote, and Henrietta?
I voted in favor, but I still am not able to get on the visual link. I've been to the PAC TV reminder sent yesterday and again today, and
Okay.
it doesn't give me a visual presence, but that's okay. I'm
Okay,
here.
all right, thanks, Henrietta. And John, just so we can register your vote?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is going in and out, but in favor.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear him.
What about Jack?
He voted in favor. Jack, you were a yes, correct? Yes. So it looks like 11-1-3.
11.
One against.
abstention, One against.
3 abstentions?
Who's the other?
That's four.
You 2 are abstentions, right? Yeah. John, Dave. Okay.
Oh, my pals.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item.
I believe the motion passes.
Correct, yes, I'm sorry. So the motion passed, we'll deal with that issue at a future agenda item, and hopefully in the next 10 or 15 minutes, we'll get some clarity on this issue. So my pleasure to welcome Rep. Muratori, Rep. Lenatra, and via Zoom, Senator Sue Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's all right with in-person folks, I know Rep. Muratori has probably a lengthier report. I'll be fairly quick. The legislation that I filed previously and went through both the House and the Senate favorably, this is the legislation that would put a moratorium on the discharge of radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay and require the establishment of a commission to study the impacts of the discharge of spent fuel pool. And the commission would be required to complete a report on findings and present it to the public across 4 public hearings in Dukes, Plymouth, Bristol, and Barnstable County. What happened is when it got to the governor's desk, despite earlier and frequent conversations with the administration, it did not move forward. So that is refiled as a standalone, except that I've updated the language to extend the proposed moratorium until 2025. The only other thing I want to mention at this point is that the federal delegation has really been amazing in putting pressure on the EPA and resulting in the declaration by the agency that Holtec would be subject to fines and even the possibility of criminal charges should they move to release water before a new permit has been issued, and that was kind of much-needed clarification. Also, the Attorney General's office has been working extremely close with us on this matter with regard to existing regulatory guidelines. And I'm going to look forward to working with the Healy administration to continue to explore avenues of action that prioritize the health of the Bay and the communities and that surround it. With that, I'm going to stay on. I know the Repository has filed a very interesting piece of legislation, and I'll be also looking forward to hearing Rep. Lenatra. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Senator. Thank you. Rep. Muratori and Lenatra and Matt, do I have this correct? You two represent 17 of the 18 precincts in Plymouth?
We represent all of them.
Oh, Steve Zeros doesn't have any?
No longer, no.
Okay, all right, good.
Just us.
Just us.
Okay, so we, okay.
You got what you see, you know?
Yeah.
Okay,
I hope
welcome.
that's okay with you.
That is perfectly
Good,
fine.
perfect, Good. Well, thank you for having us. Thank you, Senator Moran. We appreciate your comments as well. And thank you for the invite. I guess under the agenda, we are others. I see on the agenda it says Senator Moran and others. So that's, we are the
Because
others.
he didn't know if there was a
People
third
didn't know.
person,
Yeah,
right? He
yeah,
didn't know.
you just
Now he
don't know.
knows.
Yeah, so.
Matt, I passed legislation for that as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we filed some legislation, and I'll give you a little bit of background on this, on Friday. We started a new session on January 5th, as everyone's aware, and part of the new session, you are then obligated to file bills. And so all bills had to be filed by this past Friday. So one bill that we have been thinking of for quite some time is the formation of this group right now. And I want to give you just a little bit of background and a little bit of history, and then moving forward, give you a little explanation. So please kind of bear with us. So just a little bit of background. This panel was formed back in 2016, and the background of it is it's an advisory capacity. The duties of the panel are to at least quarterly meetings until the shutdown of the plant for the purpose of discussing issues related to decommissioning and planning activities. The second item was to hold a minimum of 4 meetings, public meetings per year for the purpose of discussing issues related to the progress of the decommissioning of the plant beginning on or about June 1st, 2019. Because remember, beyond 2016, when this came through, we didn't know when the plant was going to be decommissioned, but we knew we had an idea it was going to be. Or when it permanently ceased power operations, provided the panel may hold additional meetings. Third, to advise the governor, general court, and the agencies of the Commonwealth and the public on issues related to the decommissioning, with written reports being provided annually to the governor and to the Energy Committee of the General Court. 4, to serve as a conduit for public information and education on and to encourage community involvement in matters related to the decommissioning of the plant and to receive written reports and presentations on the decommissioning of the station at its regular meetings. 5, to periodically receive reports on the decommissioning trust fund and other funds associated with decommissioning of the plant, including fund balances, expenditures made, and reimbursements received. And the 6th item was to receive reports regarding decommissioning plans, including any site assessments and post-shutdown decommissioning assessment reports, provided a forum for receiving public comment on these plans and reports, and to provide a comment on these plans and reports as a panel may consider appropriate to state agencies and the owner of the plant and in annual reports described in Clause 3. So those 6 points, those 6 points I wanted to highlight because the last 2, because of the MOU that was signed by the AG's office and Holtec in June of 2020, we have removed those. What we're trying to do is to streamline this now. So those 2 have been removed. A timeline was added in the new legislation stating the panel should meet quarterly as set forth in subsection I through the new Nuclear Regulatory Commission, partially site release of the property and annually until the spent fuel is removed from the site and the NRC license is terminated. So I wanted to give you now some bullet points of the new legislation. The Nuclear Decommissioning Citizen Advisory Panel was created, again, through state law in 2016, was created during a time of uncertainty around the closure and eventual decommissioning. Since the date, this panel has done exceptional work, and we had really dedicated to, appreciative of everything you've done, your dedication that you served on this. Sure. You're fascinated by what I'm saying, aren't you? And you've had experts on, you've had plant officials here, you've had local, state leaders here, community leaders, and you've gone through so many issues. There's been so many appointments, and I know there's issues with appointments of people as well, and that's been an ongoing issue that we've been struggling with. You've been through the closure, the sale, and the announcement of the decommissioning. So you've done an awful lot. The circumstances today, though, are far different than they were in 2016. Now, in 2016, when I was first elected in 2014, what we tried to do is to try to get the state more involved with this, because in previous years, previous decades, the state never wanted anything to do with this power plant. And John and I have been around long enough to know this, that whenever we tried to get the state involved, they wanted nothing to do with it. So we knew that the light was, it was coming to the end. So we wanted a way to do this, and we worked with the Baker administration to try to get them involved. We really couldn't. So what we did was we settled on the Citizens Advisory Panel, at least, as a way to do this. So the reason why we filed this legislation was to update the panel in a manner to make it more effective and in line with the current conditions and expectations of the project, as well as preparing the community for what lies ahead for the site once it's cleaned up. Back in 2016, Entergy owned the plant, had projected a 60-year timeline to decommission the facility, and there was no agreement between the Commonwealth and any company around the decommissioning of the project. Today, Holtec, as the owner, has signed an agreement with the Commonwealth and sets forth the terms and conditions in which the site will be cleaned up and oversight therein of the agreement. Therefore, this legislation gives the state a more active role in running the panel to both provide awareness of the compliance of the agreements, ensure the correct technical knowledge is impaneled on the group, as well as prepare the community for the eventual redevelopment of the site, for the economic development following the closure upon cleanup of this site. This legislation follows closely to the New York Decommissioning Oversight Board to ensure both the current and future needs are addressed in the project while sticking to the agreed-upon regulations in the June 2020 MOU. As a panel that is advisory, the need to address regulations and agreements is paramount to the success of the project, to protect all the citizens of the Commonwealth, especially the residents of the town of Plymouth. In a comparison, when you start looking at the commission or the committee, right now there are 21. We're proposing, and again, this is legislation that's proposed, and this legislation will go through a whole process that will be welcoming comments from people on this commission as well as the general public as well. So this is just a starting point. But we're proposing going from 21 members down to 15. What it will do is we'll keep all the secretaries on board that are currently here now, the Secretary of Energy, the Commissioner of Public Utilities, Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Director of MEMA, Director of Department of Public Health. We've also added the Governor's office as well as the Attorney General's office. And again, these are all and/or their designees as well. We've asked that we're asking that the chair of the board, selectmen of the town of Plymouth, will have 2 appointees. One will be somebody from the board or their designee, and another one would be somebody in the environmental community in the town of Plymouth. Now, that could be the environmental director for the town of Plymouth or somebody else in the town of Plymouth, or beyond the town of Plymouth. It doesn't have to be just Plymouth. We've also asked to have a retiree representative from Pilgrim appointed, somebody that has environmental, physical security background. A representative, we're asking for a representative from the Plymouth Economic Development Foundation. Instead of having the Old Colony Planning Council, we thought we'd have the Economic Foundation to go with my original point of we need to look at how we're going to redevelop this land years to come. We're looking for a technical expert with knowledge of decommissioning and spent fuel management issues, appointed by the chair of the panel. a representative of the local environmental community, as I said, and 2 at-large appointments, 1 recommended by the state senator and 1 recommended by the state representative who represent the former site location and appointed by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. Now, under the MOU, that was signed on June 17th, 2020, the Attorney General and the Baker administration announced a comprehensive agreement that ensures critical environmental, public safety, and financial protections for Massachusetts residents during the dismantling and cleanup of the station. The settlement agreement reached with Holtec, LLC, and Holtec Decommissioning International resolves a petition the Commonwealth filed with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we all know the history of those lawsuits. It also provided critical protection that includes compliance measures stricter than federal requirements and secures the funds necessary to safely and properly clean up the site. Importantly, the agreement ensures that the cleanup of the site is overseen by state agencies and to be held in the Commonwealth's strict radiological and non-radiological hazard waste cleanup standards, and that the necessary funds will continue to be available to ensure the resources are restored and public health is protected. Again, under the MOU, under financial assurances, the agreement established a robust set of financial assurances and related reporting mechanisms to ensure that sufficient funds will be available to promptly and safely dismantle the nuclear power plant, clean up radiological and non-radiological contamination, restore the site, and manage spent nuclear fuel on site until it's transported out of state. Under the terms of the agreement, Holtec must maintain at least $193 million in funds, thank you, until it completes most of the cleanup and site restoration work. After that point, $38.4 million in the funds until the spent nuclear fuel is removed from the plant. Holtec is also required to obtain $30 million in pollution liability insurance and secure performance and bonds for certain contracts. The agreement requires Holtec to provide monthly reports to the state in order to monitor the progress of the work at the plant and to foresee any financial issues. Funding provisions for the Mass Department of Public Health, Mass Emergency Management, and the Mass Department of Mass Environmental Protection requirements as well. The agreement requires Holtec to comply with the state's strict cleanup standards, as I said, when it comes to radiological and non-radiological hazardous. To advance the cleanup work, the agreement requires Holtec to submit to the Mass DEP and DPH an initial site assessment of the property to ascertain the types of contamination of the property, of which contamination may be located, and establishes clear guidelines for the removal and decontamination of the structure, including radiological contamination structure at the site. Mass DEP and DPH will oversee the cleanup work to ensure the public health and environment are protected. To aid in that front, the agreement secures funding for DPH so they continue monitoring air and food sources outside of the plant's boundaries for any outside radiological conditions. The agreement ensures that property is cleaned up to the level that will allow for its future reuse to benefit surrounding local communities, including the town of Plymouth. And under public safety, the agreement includes specific emergency preparedness requirements to protect the public in the event of radiological emergency on the site. And to further those requirements, MEMA will receive continued funding each year to perform its emergency preparations. To ensure enhanced public safety, the agreement also requires Holtec to implement cybersecurity measures to limit threats that could compromise the plant system designed to safely secure plant assets such as spent nuclear fuel that will remain on site. So the reason I took the time to go through this is because there's people that have been around, like Mary and Pine and John and I and others, a long time on this. And there's a lot of people that just don't know, don't understand all this, don't know all this information. So it's important to give out the facts of what's really out there. And I think it's time now to take a look at this this most important work that you've been doing it and fine tuning it in a way that's going to be helpful as we navigate the spent fuel rods that we all can agree are probably never going to move off that site. How we're going to get rid of the water, the perception of that water going into the bay, versus the science of that, and a couple, and the funding that's there. Those things that we really need to start focusing in on and really paying attention to that. And we need the state to do that. The state needs to step up, and not just and I shouldn't say just as a citizen advisory panel, because you play an important role. But they need to be at the table now. They need to be here overseeing those MOUs, overseeing those agreements, making sure the federal government's doing what they're doing, making sure Holtec's doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's what they should be doing. And I'm hopeful that with this legislation and this today starting the discussion and at the state level and with Governor Healy and the state legislature, that we'll be able to have this discussion over the next 18 months. Again, this bill was just filed. Committees have not been formed yet, so this hasn't been assigned to a committee yet. We will let you know once we have the exact bill number. We do have a House docket number now, which is 3705, if anybody wants to go on site to look at it, HD 3705. And again, once it has a hearing date, we'll be sure to let you know that as well, because we are welcoming comments on this. We are welcoming comments, and we're welcoming your help with this. And now I don't know if you have any other comments to add?
You got it all.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
I know.
Matt, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one question?
Sure, in a moment. Sure. Jim, hold on. So what kind of a timeline are we looking at here, Matt, in a quasi-perfect world?
Well, we're in session for 2 years.
Correct.
We suspect committees will be formed probably in March.
Yeah,
and
we'll be in March, and then we'll have hearings, and this was filed in a timely manner. It's not a late file. It was
Right.
filed in a timely manner. It will be assigned to a committee. We'll have a hearing, just like any other thing goes. But in that hearing, it's really important, as Rep. Muratori said, to have your input. We don't know how they're going to run this year. We were in hybrid before, so you may have that option too, to testify during hybrid or to come into the State House. There's powers and numbers, right? Power in numbers, power in voices. So we will absolutely make sure that you all have that date, and that's when your input is helpful.
So do you have text that you could email along to the committee so that the members
Yes,
have
we
what you
do.
filed on Friday?
Yes.
Yeah, we
And
will
then-
send this out. I'll have Betty send it to you, John. You can send it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so
You can
last
send it out.
question before we go to Jim. Sorry, Matt, I know you had a pretty good relationship with the former governor. So now we have a new governor, new administration, still getting their feet underneath them, so to say. Do you expect anything different out of the corner office with respect to this issue, or is there a heightened awareness? Is this?
I think because she was the Attorney General and was involved with the MOU, she has a better understanding of this. And I think we're hopeful that because of that, and we're coming down the stretch, that there'll be buy-in, I believe. I don't know what your
I know,
thoughts
I
are.
feel the same. So we've discussed it. She's been to Plymouth. I don't know who was with me, but she's been here, and it's been brought up, and the lieutenant governor, too. I've spoken to them briefly, so I really think that they're going to be on top of this. And I'm hopeful. I mean, we both have a good relationship with them.
The key, I think, is going to be once it gets to committee, is to try to get the committee to pass in committee and get it out through the process and get it on the House floor. That's going to be the harder part, I believe. I don't believe we're going to have a problem with the governor.
So now I got one more question, and that my first meeting with Charlie Baker, I think, was back in 2015. Matthew was in the room, and one of my first questions to him was, had he ever toured the plant? And his answer was no, but he got down there. So same question to Maura Healy. Has she been down there?
Not that I know of.
So I would
We'll
put
extend
that on
invitation.
you and Senator Moran
Yeah, good point.
she needs to put that on her to-do list, okay? All right, Jim?
My only very simple question. I assume you're going to provide us with a copy of your statement.
What I could do is, I can send you, well, we're going to send you the HD 3705.
Right.
Yeah, and I can clean this up a little bit with my notes and all
Great.
that, and send you something, absolutely.
It's a lot better than
Because it
trying
gives
to
a,
copy it
it gives a
down on the table.
comparison. And actually, I neglected to say too, that this, so it's section 14 of the regulation that we're looking to change. So it's the same regulations, but it's section 14. And what we changed the name to, the Pilgrim Decommissioning State Oversight Panel is what we called it.
Great.
Andrew, and then Mary?
There was a lot in there.
Yes.
So I'm trying to just play back what I think I heard, which was that, what I thought I heard you say is that I think most of the issues of public health and environmental concern have been resolved, and that this really is a matter of primarily state agency jurisdiction at this point, and pivoting towards redevelopment.
I think it's, I'm going to change that a little bit. I think it's adding redevelopment, but that's not being spoken about. I think the state agencies through the MOU and the federal agencies through DEP, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the DPH and DEP here in Massachusetts as well. I think they have covered everything they can at this point. I don't know what else, we've had conversations with the Attorney General's office previously to the previous Attorney General's office. And we think we have, with that MOU, everything kind of covered the best we can. So it's really, I guess I'll put it this way, it's believing and trusting in what the state put together in MOU and what the federal government's going to do to ensure these things are happening. But we know what trust is, trust but verify. So I believe by having a state panel overseeing all that to ensure all those pieces are followed through with, and adding the redevelopment piece to this.
Okay, well, without having had the opportunity to read the docket, and I'd be interested in seeing it, my concern would be that the issue of primary concern to people that Governor Baker appointed me to represent in this don't think that the issues around the release of the radioactive water is adequately covered, that we know what we need to know, and that there needs to be an outward public-facing way to ensure that accountability, that trust but verify. You stole what I was going to say there. And that if the docket would compromise or constrain the ability to achieve those answers, then I would have a problem supporting and not opposing the legislation, but I'll give it the chance to read the docket first.
Yeah, absolutely not. If anything, this helps enhance that, because it's already out there what can be done.
So when you go from 21 to 15, who of us are leaving?
Nobody from the state agencies, so, let me see, I thought I was clear on that, but, so removed is, a member of the Nuclear Matters Committee in Plymouth. I don't think that exists anymore.
That's currently vacant.
Yep. Representative of the Old Colony Planning Council, which I think I said, that's removed. 2 members appointed by the governor's office were removed, but the governor's staff appointee added to the new legislation. 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House changed to recommended by the state rep. 1 member appointed by the minority leader of the House, that's been removed. 2 members appointed by the President of the Senate changed to 1 recommended by the state senator. And 1 member appointed by the minority leader has been removed.
Okay. So I think the 2 governor's appointees are you and me.
Mary?
But that doesn't mean that you couldn't be reappointed by the new governors.
I will have to obviously read it.
Of course.
But my first thought, my first thought, this is Mary Lambert.
Maybe shut it down.
Oh. Making up for not having been heard, is that it is overly focused on Plymouth.
Thank you.
And as a result of that, I think, being from Duxbury, recognizing the concern and impact in all the Cape communities, recognizing more than Plymouth, is impacted. And I think by removing some of these members, you will be removing people who are not from Plymouth. I appreciate it's the host community, but I live closer than most people in Plymouth to the reactor. The oysters in Duxbury, real estate in Duxbury, et cetera, et cetera. You can go to Brewster, you go to the Cape. And I think there has to be oversight and voices, not removed, but remain. And I think also a void that we have had, and I know they've had the same trouble up in Vermont, is the lack of funding. The only expert really we've gotten was paid for by Holtec.
And that,
We need experts, and
Yeah, right.
they need to eat too.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. And this is what this does too. By having the state involvement, they will be able to bring experts in to help and advise them. So it's getting them involved.
But that's
With
not
regard to-
bringing necessarily independent experts, that if you have a citizens panel that have more than state employees on them, even though I appreciate greatly the expertise, et cetera, of our state employees, I think the citizen experts, citizens could recommend experts that the state is not going to come up with. They might go to MIT, to the nuclear engineering department.
And that's why there are people on here that will be pointed outside of that state too.
Yeah.
So it does have that.
But
Now,
that's my concern. and
well, it
that's-
does have that, so there is ability to appoint other people. But again, this is the beginning point.
Sure,
So
sure.
part of the process could be, as recommendations as this moves forward, is to add some more people like that
Right.
to do that.
And my third.
That's not an issue, but if I may.
Oh,
just
sure, I'm
finish my
sorry.
comment. We represent Plymouth. And I think Plymouth has taken a back seat to this for a long time. And these are just my personal comments now, okay? And I've been involved with this since 2005. And I've watched, I've heard, I've been to so many meetings on the federal level, the state level, the local level. And people forget, I think, or don't remember, that Plymouth is the host, and I'm glad you said that. And we need a bigger say in that now, because it's coming to the end. It's coming to the end, and where is everyone going to be once the water's all taken care of? Okay, it's trucked out, or it's evaporated, or it's thrown in the ocean, whatever. Where's everyone going to be? Ma'am, I'm not saying to throw it in the ocean. I'm just saying whatever the resolution is going to be of that. Okay? My point being, I'm not here to debate on the water. I'm not an expert in that. That's up to all you and the environmental people and all that to deal with that. I'm not there to talk about it. I'm talking about when that's dealt with. When that is dealt with, what is left? The land that's left. We need to make sure that people of Plymouth are covered by that, and there's some development on that. I'm not saying get rid of anything you've done to be sure that the water is dealt with in the correct way. Absolutely number one priority. Making sure the trust fund money's there, absolutely. I'm not saying get rid of that, not at all. But let's add Plymouth to the conversation now as it's coming to the end. That's what I'm saying.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I just want to assure that the broader community that's impacted, their voice will be properly heard. And my last point, and then we can talk about this later, would be to address the voting issue, that we've had this problem going back when Sean Mullen tried to get a bill passed and whatever, to solve the inability of this group to actually vote on issues.
I don't know. I think by doing, that's the other big reason doing this. I think by having the state agencies' involvement in doing this, and with the citizens involved as well, I think they'll be able to vote. Because I do agree with you. I think that's been the biggest issue in this whole thing.
All right, Matt and Kathy, thank you. I just want to We do have one member
He doesn't look this way.
I know.
I just
'Cause
did. All right, Pine, go ahead.
I don't exist today, but.
Well, we're others too,
So I want to support what Mary said, but I'm going to drive you to a single point, and that is the funding. The reason that this group failed to have the muscle we need in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished is because on the first meeting, I don't know whether it was the secretary of DPU or a commissioner or who she was, got thrown off the bench. And with that was thrown off any state support. The only state support this group has is when Tory Kim provides the draft minutes, when somebody goes and watches the meeting afterwards and provides the draft minutes. That's the support we have. And it comes down to, it's voting too. And I understand the position that the state agencies are in. I really do get it. It's been a tough ride in terms of the settlement agreement and all of that. It's been a tough ride in terms of the transition between Entergy, the producer of electricity, and Holtec, my best friend in cleaning up everything, because we need them. The biggest problem we have is the spent fuel, the waste fuel. Not the numbers of people that should be concerned about it, but that is the problem. And it's going to take a very classic, very heavy lift to resolve that. And as I said to some people over the weekend, time is not on our side. No. It's on the Hill. But I came in boots today because our place flooded all day long, you know, and we're not alone in that. And, you know, when you talk about reuse and economic development in Plymouth, it sounds to me like you're talking about the forest. And I know there's a lot of conservationists out there that would like to protect that forest, because you're sure not going to make $1 million or $1 billion or whatever it is where the reactor building is, because it's going to be underwater pretty soon. And that's why I'm in a hurry to get it cleaned up. And I hope that everybody gets to be in a hurry to clean it up, because we don't have time to waste. So I beg, put some money in there, put a good way of monitoring that so that we're not wasting it. You know, pull Senator Markey in to give us the resources from the Department of Energy to start applying, not just to shifting around the transportation stuff, but to fixing the nuclear fuel waste problem. The 90% of radioactivity that's in those casts on the Hill. Okay. That's what we have to do, and I hope that we can drive this bill to do that. Thank you.
Agree.
Okay, I just wanted to, there was one representative of the federal delegation on the Zoom meeting. I don't know if Mr. Jackman is there. Mike, while you have the state here, was there anything that you wanted to add in? You want to weigh in on anything tonight?
Just quickly, Mr. Chairman, I will add, just to amend your statement, we're also joined by Caleb White from Senator Warren's office.
Okay, thank you.
And Ben Thomas from Senator Markey's office are also on the Zoom. Senator Moran referred to the EPA's statements since we last met, which are an encouraging development from our perspective. We're working with them closely to get more updates on that and what the direction will be for the oversight, and we'll report back when we know more.
Okay. All right, Mike, thank you. Caleb and Ben, if you're there, if you want to weigh in on anything, let us know. If not, we'll continue on. What do you got?
Hi. Yeah, Caleb here.
Caleb.
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, kind of just doubling down on what Mike said. We've definitely been very communicative between our offices and EPA and state agencies as well. So just trying to stay on top of it as best we can, to stay up with the updates, and yeah, we'll just continue to, as Mike said, update you as we know more.
And Caleb, you work for who? Elizabeth? Senator Warren?
Yeah, I'm Senator Warren's regional director for the South Coast Cape and Islands.
All right, so while I brought up the topic 20 minutes ago, just out of curiosity, Mike and Caleb, have your two bosses respectively visited the site ever?
I do not know off the top of my head. It's definitely something I can check into, but I don't know off the cuff.
Well, if you find out that the answer is no, can you put it on her to-do list, please?
Definitely can pass that, yes.
Thank you. And Mike, how about your boss?
Yeah, Congressman Keating has been to the plant at least twice that I know of.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And Ben, you here?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Chair. I don't have video, but so grateful for the opportunity to speak. I'm the Senator's Regional Director for the 9th Congressional District, and my colleague Jim Cantwell, who's the Senator's State Director, sends his regards that he wasn't able to join tonight because of a competing event, but I don't have any major updates. We're continuing to work on all things related to Holtec and continuing to be in constant communication with the EPA as well as the other congressional offices. And also working with all the stakeholders relating to that, the request for an independent analysis of the water, and grateful for Mr. Priest and Mr. Pickering for their work with DPH and DEP on advancing the independent testing. But I don't have any other further updates, and just want to thank Senator Moran and Representative Muratori and Representative for all of their work, Representative Lenantra for all of their work on this, and we're happy to be a resource as things move forward, and hopefully we'll have some new updates soon.
And Ben, has your boss ever been on the ground down at the plant?
I'm not sure if the senator has been down on the ground during his decades of work in this nuclear energy space, but I can check back about that. I know Katie Moorfield, who's the senator's leader on energy, myself, and Jim Cantwell were just down there a few months ago with the NRC chairman touring the plant. And so I will certainly share the interest in having the senator go back for a visit.
Okay, thank you. Matt, anything else? Henrietta, go ahead. Last question.
Yeah, thanks. Not so much a question. I wanted, first of all, to appreciate all the work that's being done by our legislative team. I wanted to say amen to everything that Pine said. And I wanted to express some concern about the new draft bill, because while I can appreciate the goal of having a state oversight committee, it seems to me that citizens like myself will have no place on such a panel. And that concerns me because citizens have had a hard time really being fully heard, even in the panel as it is currently constituted. And I think that the public is still not just every bit as concerned as it was, but ever more concerned about the implications, not just of the water, but of the larger issues that then loom the canisters sitting on the hill. So I just want to express my concern that the new legislation, the new constituted panel, should this legislation go through, must not close out citizens unattached, citizens who are not part of the government oversight, citizens who are not attached to the industry, citizens who do not have any vested interest except the health and well-being of the community. And that's what I feel I'm trying to bring to the panel as a representative of citizens of Plymouth and as a member of the League of Women Voters. So that was my comment. And I will be very interested in hearing and seeing, in reading the details of HD 3705.
Senator Moran, Rep. Muratori, Rep. Lenantra, and the representatives of our federal delegation, I certainly appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to, before we move on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to facilitate an individual with respect to public comment, because I think he has homework that needs to be done, and his bedtime is at 8:30. So, Tim, you ready for prime time? All right, go. Let's get this done, and we'll move, then after that, we'll move on to the Holtec update. Mike, just, is microphone on?
It is now. It is now? Okay. Hello, again. My name is Timothy Bennett Jr., and I spoke at... How do you make it louder?
You talk louder.
Oh. Well, how am I supposed to know how to do that?
Move the microphone closer to you.
I spoke at a prior NDCAP meeting, and I am 11 years old and live in Priscilla Beach with my parents and my 8-year-old brother, Bobby. My grandparents and friends also live here, and our neighborhood is full of really nice families who enjoy our beach, which is right next to the power plant. When I spoke at our past meeting, I mentioned my great-grandfather who died from asbestos cancer that he got from working at the shipyard, doing his welding job that he believed to be safe. Now I see ads on TV for victims of Camp Lejeune. These shoulders got sick from contamination at a place they also thought was safe. Now, many years later, they are getting sick and dying. I am worried that in 20 years, long after Holtec is come and gone, that health officials determine that the safe water that they dumped into the water wasn't so safe after all. And then when it's too late, then it's too late for all my nice neighbors and my family. And where does that leave me and Bobby? Sick, maybe dead. Who knows? But I don't think it's fair or worth taking a chance when Holtec has other safer options that they don't want to because it's more expensive. I'm sad that they are putting a price tag on me and my little brother's health. Help us stop them, because that would be nice.
All right, now we're moving on to the Holtec update, decommissioning update with Mr. Dave Noyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be the update for the January NDCAP meeting. As usual, the first slide is the waterfall chart. So this is, again, the 6 major activities associated with decommissioning at the plant. Those specific activities are the characterization of the plant, dry cast storage, reactor segmentation, dismantling the physical facility, waste management, and then final site restoration. As far as characterization goes, we still are on track for a 2024 submission of the license termination plan. Activities that have been ongoing are the development of the license termination chapters that are in accordance with the NRC's governing regulation 10 CFR 20.1403. As far as the dry cast storage goes, not much to report there. We continue to be custodians for the waste storage pending whatever the final disposition is. So we continue to surveil that with full security measures in place. I will discuss on separate slides reactor segmentation, dismantling, waste management, and site restoration will follow the license termination planning and the final status survey. So for ongoing demolition activities, what you see here is the plant's trash compaction facility. The building was built in 1986. It was used for handling of radioactive material, both for receipt and for packaging and shipment of material. So we have completed the decontamination and physical removal of that building down to grade. So that is down to pad, and all of the radiological material at the closest point to the water that exists at the plant has been properly dispositioned and either shipped or moved elsewhere on the site. For upcoming activities for demolition, the next building to be demolished will be the old main gate building. So when the plant was earlier on in the plant life, this was the main security access from the area that is now currently the ISFAC. Used to be a parking lot. This security building has been cleaned out, has been gapped, meaning that we have removed all the sources of energy from within the building. We've done disposition surveys to ensure that we understand asbestos or other hazardous material, and also any radiological materials. The abatement of asbestos material and floor tile will be completed in the first quarter, as will structural demolition. Excuse me. So looking forward to demolition activities. The red buildings have been demolished down to grade. The yellow building is the trash compaction facility. So now just removal of some additional residual rubble material that will soon join the population of material that has been demolished all the way down to grade, and will be red and put us at approximately 75% of the site footprint demolished down to grade. Upcoming within the first half of this year will be additional demolition activities, 5 buildings and structures that you see highlighted in green. In addition to that, the two remaining underground storage tanks on site, they right now hold the diesel fuel that we use to run the house heating boilers. After this heating season, those tanks will be removed, and 4 above-ground storage tanks, 2 condensate storage tanks, a demon water storage tank, and fire water storage tank will be removed, all slated to be done in the first half of this year.
Dave, what's the blue again?
The blue will remain, so that is the administration building, and that will remain at least through the early phases of demolition. All the networking and computer portals on site run through that building.
Thank you.
So that will remain, and it'll also be the essentially the work and staging area for individuals that will be performing work on the site. So for reactor segmentation, we continue on with removal of the internal components that at various times were part of the reactor structure. Control rod blades, fuel support castings, control rod guide tubes. You can see the numbers of items that have been packaged and made ready for shipment, and the numbers that remain. All of them are scheduled to be completed by the end of the first quarter of this year. Late in the first quarter of this year, we'll be removing the core plate, which is a lower portion of the reactor vessel assembly, and into the second quarter, removing the jet pumps, which will allow us to be able to ready the reactor cavity for drain down, for that water to go from what is currently in the dryer separator pit and the reactor cavity. That water will be transferred to the torus. The picture shows a control rod blade being moved into the crusher assembly. So in order to be able to consolidate waste for shipment, the control rod blades, which are a cruciform shape, are essentially crushed into a flat surface that allows us to more readily ship them. We have done a lot of work with respect to risk reduction at the site. So it still remains very much an active construction or active physical work site. And one of the things that was important in the early phases of demolition was to reduce the risk that exists on any construction site. In that vein, we have de-energized and removed electrical transformers. The transformers that exist on site, particularly those that are lightly loaded, can become a fire hazard. They're energized electrical components in an oil bath for cooling. And we've all seen pictures of transformers that have caught fire. So it was important as part of a risk reduction measure in order to get those transformers de-energized, get the oil removed from them, and get the transformers removed from site. We've also removed over 16,000 gallons of lubricating oil. That was from the plant's main turbine and also from several pumps and large pieces of equipment. We had on site when the plant was operating a hydrogen storage facility that being an explosive gas stored under pressure that has been removed from site. We have removed all compressed gas cylinders from inside of the industrial building, so the compressed gas cylinders could, in some cases, they were flammable. In other cases, they could become pressurized projectiles. So those have been removed from the buildings, and we emptied and demolished a storage facility for holding those gas bottles. In addition to that, we've updated our fire detection capability. Much different than an operating plant, portions of the process buildings are not regularly accessed by personnel anymore. So it was important that we rethought the fire protection scheme and ensured that we had the right fire protection identification of hazards of heat or smoke within areas of the plant for quick identification of issues that could result in the spread of fire. In addition to that, we looked at opportunities for environmental impact reduction. So when the plant was operating, one of the chemicals that was in use at the plant was sodium hypochlorite. This was a chemical under the Toxic Use Protection Program that was the only Tier 1, the most severe or most toxic chemical, excuse me, on site. And it was used for biofouling control. What it would do would be to slow the growth of blue mussels that would allow us to be able to keep the heat exchangers within the plant free of being plugged by that marine material. We found out after we shut the plant down that we had the ability to be able to cycle those heat exchangers in and out of service. And what that allowed us to do is, without using sodium hypochlorite, we could slow the growth of the blue mussels by depriving them of oxygen. And the ability to be able to do that has allowed us to completely eliminate the use of sodium hypochlorite while at the same time controlling that mussel growth to a degree where it's acceptable. We can still maintain our cooling systems the way that we need to. So we've completely eliminated the use of a level 1 toxic use chemical. In addition to that, we've talked a lot about the NEPDES permit. There are 11 outfalls under the NEPDES permit. This table is kind of hard to read, but of those 11 outfalls, 5 of them are stormwater outfalls, and they remain in service. So essentially, what they are is they are storm drains that carry water runoff from the plant. So those 5 remain in service. 4 of the outfalls have been abandoned, and there are 4 of the outfalls that were the most environmentally significant. Outfall number 1 was the circulating water system. So it operated at a differential temperature of 32 degrees and up to 102 degrees discharge temperature as authorized under the NEPDES permit. So as far as thermal pollution goes, it was a significant impact to the environment. That outfall has been eliminated. Also, outfall number 2, which is thermal backwash of the main condensers, is no longer required to be operated. That allowed operation up to 120 degree discharge temperature. and that outfall, the use of that outfall has been completely eliminated. In addition to that, we had an outfall 11, which was a discharge from our boilers, our plant heating boilers, the ability to be able to drain them when we needed to, and also diverting from our makeup water supply when the water did not meet quality standards. So we've eliminated the need for that outfall by controlling that boiler to an on-site storage, and we've eliminated the need for a makeup demineralizer divert by installing a system that doesn't have a divert function. We've also eliminated screen wash, which was a significant concern for potential impingement of marine life on the plant's traveling screens and trash rack. So right now, of the 11 outfalls that the plant is permitted for, 4 of them have been abandoned. 5 of them are the stormwater outfalls that remain for stormwater runoff. There's 1 of them that remains active and in service. That is the salt service water system. And instead of having the discharge of that system at a 32-degree delta T, the limits that are allowed under the new NEPDES permit are only 10 degrees delta T at about significantly less flow. So rather than 300,000 gallons per minute, on the order of about a maximum of what we operate with a salt service water pump of about 3,000 gallons per minute. The only other outfall that remains available for our use, and we have not used it under the term of the new contract, is the new permit, is our waste neutralizing sump. So that is outfall 14, and that collects water to be used from draining of closed cooling water systems and water that's collected in reactor and turbine building sumps. But we've been able to manage our water and not discharge from that flow point. Another big part of the environmental responsibility of the decommissioning effort is through waste elimination. So some of the radiological material that's being removed from the plant can find uses at other operating plants. So on the right-hand side of the picture are hydraulic control units. These are the units that provide the motive force for reactor scram of control rod drives. The accumulators on those hydraulic control units are highly sought after within the industry. So we were able to remove those, and we were able to find another plant that could use them. That allows us to be able to recover some of the cost of removal, but also prevents us from having to bury them as radiological waste. One of the other pieces of equipment was our trash compactor. In the trash compaction facility, excuse me, we had a trash compactor that was also radiological material. We found an organization that handled radiological material and had a use for that, so we were able to not have to send that to burial. For recycling and waste elimination on the non-nuclear side, of 9.2 million pounds of non-radiological waste that we've generated, greater than 8.2 million pounds has gone to recycle or reuse. You can see on the picture on the right-hand side, multiple dumpsters are set up for building demolition. So material that can be used as either reclaimed concrete, can be used as metals for salvage. All that material is pulled out and is properly segregated, and we make use of recycle streams to the maximum extent possible. We've also taken some of our non-radiological but nuclear components, like the station batteries that are shown on the left-hand side. We've been able to find an organization that is able to use those batteries. that have been maintained at a high degree of readiness and with pretty much impeccable preventive maintenance. So they're of value to another organization and prevents us from having to dispose of those lead-acid batteries. As far as waste goes, the radiological shipments, we continue to move radioactive material as quickly as we generate it, as quickly as we can send it off-site. We are sending it either by truck or by truck to a transload facility where it goes via rail from Mansfield. Excuse me, and we've disposed of in 2022 just under 90,000 cubic feet of Class A waste and 62 cubic feet of Class B and C waste. That material is all disposed of at the WCS facility in Texas. For the water management update, we continue to pursue modifications to the NEPDES and surface water discharge permit. Our goal for the permit submittal is to mid to the late first quarter of 2023. So with the pursuit of that permit modification, we will not discharge until that permit modification process goes through its process, and we recognize the authority of the EPA and their specific restrictions that they've placed on us via the letters that we've received. So we have acknowledged those, we understand them, and we will fully comply with them. And that's it for the update, pending questions.
Dave, thank you. Just a quick question, and maybe Mr. Pickering or Mr. Priest can contribute here, but so just on the 1 million gallons, I think it was Seth, when we were here in late November, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was stated that there was a high probability that the state would be on site with sample water from the 3 containment areas, and that testing might be underway. But I was just curious, looking for an update about, where we are in that process and what the public can expect as far as that happening.
So I'll have an update in my report out.
Okay.
We have not sampled yet.
Yes.
But we're working on it.
Okay, and you'll do an update in a few minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Pine?
So Dave, on your slide 5, I think it was, it showed all of the tanks and everything that you were going to take down?
Yes.
I think I heard you right when you said they were all water tanks. One was a demineralized water tank, one was a standby water tank, and something else was a water tank?
Yeah, the above-ground storage tanks are all water tanks. There's a fire water storage tank, which is city water. Condensate storage tanks were the tanks that were used to fill the dryer separator pit and the reactor cavity during refueling activities.
So there's at least 3 that are 250,000 gallons, maybe?
Yeah, the condensate storage tanks are 250,000 gallons. I believe the firewater storage tank might be a little bit less than that, maybe 200,000 or a little bit more. And the demon water storage tank is a little bit smaller.
Is there any chance you can recycle those up to on top of the hill?
The tanks can't be taken out whole.
You can't take them apart and
No.
reassemble them or
No.
anything? They can't use them? Okay. One more question.
John, I have a question.
Oh, yeah, ask Jack. Jack has it.
Jack, go ahead.
Sure. Dave, it was either slide 9 or 10 where you showed the outfalls. I think it might be helpful where you said that there were 4 that are now out of use. Are they mechanically isolated?
The equipment that provided motive force to be able to either pull water through them or to put water into them have been isolated.
Great. And then the remaining outfalls, could you talk about the monitoring that you do on those outfalls?
I can.
So you'd know.
Yep, thanks. So outfall 10 is a salt surface water system. That is limited to differential temperature requirements. That is, we have recorders. When the pumps are operating, we measure that differential temperature on 5-minute intervals, and then we report the results to the state, both on a monthly maximum, monthly average and a daily maximum. So those are reported in accordance with the permit, along with oil and grease and pH.
How about radiation monitoring equipment that's on the outfall that would be a potential path that remains in service?
There is radiological monitoring on the reactor building closed cooling water system. That system is isolated. That transfers its heat through heat exchangers to salt surface water. There's no direct measurement for radiation in the salt surface water system.
That's not expected to be a radioactive material containing system.
That's correct. It's a once-through cooling system, and it has multiple levels of heat exchangers to any systems that may have radiologically contaminated fluid in them.
Thank you.
All right, Dave Nichols and then Jim Lampert.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for the report. You mentioned you were able to recover some cost through the reuse or the sale, I guess, of some of the equipment. Based on when you closed the books in December, have you spent more or less than you projected so far for the decommissioning?
We are pretty much where we expected to be cost expenditure-wise. We made some advances beyond what the original schedule called for. So we may be a little bit under budget. We do have a update coming up in March where we'll do a full-blown assessment, and that'll be public. The state gets a copy of that under the state agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And at the March meeting, that's something you could put into your update?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
At one slide, you showed us the amount that you shipped this year to WCS, and you don't have to blow up the number. Previous reports in last years, we've gotten partial year shipments. Can you tell us how much total ABC, low-level radioactive waste, you shipped to WCS in the course of this whole process?
I don't have the figures in front of me for prior to this calendar year, but I can get them.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to.
Yeah, no,
we keep seeing part of your figures.
Yeah, we obviously keep real close track of it, so yeah, I can provide that.
And I'm going to have some questions, just basically understanding the outfalls. Can I ask those off with you offline?
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's no reason to keep anybody else's mind on that.
Jack?
Jim Lambert, Jim, this is Jack again. Hey, the numbers for solid waste generated and shipped from Pilgrim are on the DPH website, and there's a year-by-year survey that's performed. So you can see how that is tracked year by year.
So you've got the totals for you. I can find the totals there.
I can't hear you.
You can find it. I can find the totals there to date.
Correct.
Thanks.
Year to year.
Thanks.
Mary?
On January 11th, I sent you and Pat O'Brien an email asking about compliance plans with both federal EPA and state regulations. You answered for the EPA by saying you were going to comply with their opinions and you were going to file an amendment. EPA deals only with chemicals, not radionuclides, but I couldn't understand your response on whether you're going to comply with the state regulations that do not distinguish in whether they be radioactive or chemical. The laws I cited were the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, Damage to the Environment Law, Mass Clean Water Act, Massachusetts Oil and Hazardous Material Release Prevention and Response Act, and the Mass Endangered Species Act. All of them do not make an exception for radioactive waste such as tritium. And your response said HDI will follow all applicable laws and regulations. The NEPDES and surface water discharge permits revision process will validate applicability compliance with the below state laws and statutes. I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Gottlieb can correct me if I'm incorrect, but I believe the permitting process in its use of coastal zone management and state agencies ensures that those stakeholder regulations are met and that they have the opportunity through their processes to be able to weigh in.
They ought to.
And so you're going to comply with them or not?
If they are applied to the permit, it will go to those agencies, and they will determine to the extent that those regulations apply or do not apply. And they will be included, any restrictions will be put in the permit.
And so what you're saying is EPA could put into the permit the restrictions for the release of radionuclides?
It would be in the surface water discharge permit with the state of Massachusetts, as I understand it. I don't know to the extent that those organizations are specific to radionuclides, but I do know that those organizations, or I believe that those organizations are stakeholders to the permitting process.
Well, thank you for your answer. I've got to work on that one.
Okay.
Oh, Andrew.
I think it was slide 6. We went through the removal of the fins to be able to, that one.
Yeah.
So for those jet pumps, when those come out, then your use of the water is done, and you suggested it goes to the Taurus?
Yeah, the use of the water in the reactor cavity in the dryer separator pit is done.
Okay.
We'll still have waste that will be in the spent fuel pool.
Okay.
And that will still be handled underwater for some period of time after that. And the water will be discharged to the Taurus.
Okay, and there's enough room within the Taurus to hold what's currently the 400 or so odd thousand you told me when I visited with you last week? With that plus whatever volume of water is here could be accommodated in the Taurus, awaiting the outcome of the permitting decisions?
That's correct. The Taurus can hold 1.6 million gallons.
So ultimately, that's where it's all going to sit and wait for permitting?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dave, thank you. Moving on to Mr. Pickering.
Excuse me, I have my hand is up.
Oh, all right, the whole screen is blank. Fine. Henrietta, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question for Dave Noyes about, if you wouldn't mind, elaborating a little bit on the outfall, I think it's the salt service water system, that outfall. I can't remember whether it's 11, what it is.
It's number 10.
Number 10.
Yes.
I would appreciate understanding more how that water is currently being used, the salt water circulating.
So it's being used intermittently to cool turbine building closed cooling water. So when we operate equipment, heat exchangers, air compressors, we use that salt service water intermittently to cool heat loads associated with equipment in the turbine building.
I see. Okay, do you mind one other question?
No.
Something I've never quite understood. A year ago, November or December, when when you, Holtec, proposed that it would be discharging the 1.1 million gallons into the bay during the first quarter of 2022, a decision that you changed, and obviously you haven't done that. But if that would have been possible, if that was possible in the first quarter of last year, why is it that now that water is needed and being used? I mean, what has changed about the necessity for that water being used in the year-long segmentation and all of those kinds of activities? Why would it have been possible to release that water a year ago? I know this is a strange question, but I've just been chewing on it and trying to wrap my head around why suddenly it wasn't possible after you changed, after in response to public pressure, you didn't release the water.
It would have never been possible. The water that's in the Taurus is providing no function for the site right now. So that 200,000 gallons could have been dispositioned at any time. The water that's in the dryer separator pit, reactor cavity, and spent fuel pool would have been needed through the completion of the work in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Seth, Dave, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here to give the interagency work group update. First item is on water discharge. The Mass DEP, EEA, and the Attorney General's office participated in a meeting that was held with US EPA and Holtec on January 12th of this year. The meeting was requested by Holtec to outline the permitting process for any proposal by Holtec to discharge water from the spent fuel pool or other decommissioning-related wastewater into Cape Cod Bay that will require new state and federal permitting. Holtec presented its understanding of the permit process for various state and federal reviews, including a federal NIPDES permit, Mass DEP water quality certification, federal consistency review by the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, or CZM, and possible review under the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, MEPA. State and federal agencies provided feedback on the permit procedures presented, which Holtec agreed to consider. CZM and EEA are currently considering the implications of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act for state permitting and any proposed discharges by Holtec. There has currently been no follow-up meeting scheduled, but we plan to have meeting in the future. Next item is, as indicated, and this is addresses your question earlier, Mr. Chairman. At the last NDCAP, Mass DEP and DPH have been working with Holtec to determine a protocol for sampling water from the reactor building. Sampling is going to occur at 3 different locations: the spent fuel pool, the separated dryer pit, and the Taurus, and will be observed by the state, Mass DEP, and Jack Priest of DPH. Split samples will be provided to the state for independent testing. Mass DEP and DPH were on site last Thursday to observe the specific locations where the samples are proposed to be taken. Holtec has provided a draft sampling protocol to Mass DEP and DPH, and the protocol will be finalized before the actual sampling events take place. Does that answer your question from before? Mass DEP has identified a laboratory that will analyze the samples, and we are working to finalize shipping plans and finalize a contract with the laboratory. Mass DEP plans to have the samples analyzed for a wide variety of non-radiological contaminants, as was presented at the last NDCAP meeting. On the site assessment work plan, Mass DEP and DPH, together with the Attorney General's office, are continuing to review Holtec's environmental assessment, site assessment, the ESA work plan, and the radioactive waste management plan. The ESA work plan must be approved by the state. Holtec's Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP, is due in April of 2025. This submission is required because Holtec previously identified hazardous materials on site. Other cleanup issues that are ongoing, Mass DEP's asbestos section continues to be actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activity that is occurring at the site, has been described tonight. We are meeting regularly with the company to manage the asbestos discovery, identification, abatement, and removal processes. An update on the wastewater treatment plant and the wastewater system at the plant. Holtec has requested to DEP to change its wastewater disposal system to a Title V system. It's currently an existing wastewater treatment plant. Mass DEP has extended the current groundwater discharge permit for the existing wastewater treatment facility to evaluate this request. Under this proposal, the flows from the plant would be discharged to a Title V system, and the existing wastewater treatment facility would be taken offline and/or demolished at that time. Mass DEP will remain involved in any permitting and approvals that are required for this to happen. So, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to ask your permission to have my colleague Gerard Martin give an update to a question.
Yes, absolutely.
That we received about anti-degradation provisions in the surface water quality standards moving forward.
And Seth, you'll still be available in a few minutes for questions, correct? Okay.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, the anti-degradation provisions of the surface water quality standards was mentioned, and we received a question about that, and I kind of stumbled a bit. And Seth indicated that we would report back tonight with a little more information on what that is. So when Holtec applies for a permit mod, and this is actually done more out of our Boston office with regional support, a review will be made to see if the anti-degradation provisions apply to new and increased point source discharges requiring the surface water discharge permit. And right now, we're looking at the discharge of the water from the spent fuel pool as a new discharge, because right now it is not included on the permit. So we will review the permit with the anti-degradation provisions in mind, and basically the anti-degradation provisions require that the existing water quality of the receiving water body is maintained, is not compromised by the discharge. The anti-deg analysis is carried out by Mass DEP using information provided by Holtec and other sources that we can collect, and it includes looking at the water quality information for the receiving water quality of the water that's going to be discharged, and proposed treatment technologies to feel comfortable that it would address any of the contaminants that are in the discharge. The analysis evaluates the potential for any new or increased discharges of pollutants to degrade the water quality so that it no longer supports existing uses. And if it's determined that that's the case, it would not be allowed under the anti-deg provisions. It should be noted that the radionuclides are not pollutants under the Clean Water Act. So we are looking at the radioactive oil and hazardous material that may be in the water in the reactor building. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. It is part of the process of reviewing the permit modification. Any questions on this?
Fine.
Fine.
And Jim?
I'm sorry.
Hi, clarify for me. You refer to the spent fuel pool as being the non-permitted discharge. It was my understanding that the water in the dryer separator pit and the Taurus and the spent fuel pool had been intermingled. Is there any distinction in the regulatory framework of those?
The current permit states that the water from the spent fuel pool cannot be discharged.
So if the water that is in the Taurus or the dryer separator pit had been at one time in the spent fuel pool, how would you look at that?
That is one of the things that we're looking at as part of our review of the permit.
Okay. All right, I have some questions for Steve.
Jim?
Yeah. Yes.
Gerard, I just didn't understand what you said when you said, excuse me, my voice is terrible, but radionuclides are not dilutants.
They're not considered a pollutant under the Clean Water Act.
They're not
You said
regulated.
pollutant.
Yeah.
I thought you said dilutant.
Oh, no.
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 Mary?
What was I going to say? Frankly, I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Can I? ask
Okay,
Seth?
we'll go to Pine. She has a question
I have
for
a-
Seth.
I
We'll
have-
come back to
I have
Mary.
3 short questions for Seth. Seth, you promised to tell me who at the CZM you're dealing with.
I'm sorry, say again?
Who at CZM is DEP?
There were a number of there were a couple of CZM folk on that meeting, so I don't have a name for you. And guess you one.
Would you send that to me via
Sure.
email or something
Yeah,
like
you
that?
bet.
Whether it's 1 or 2 or 5, I don't really care. I'm just interested in talking to them. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
You bet.
So, what lab did DEP finally settle on? Can you tell us?
It's Eurofins, their laboratories in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, which is part of the shipping that we're trying to work out. They do have a North Kingston, Rhode Island location, but that's not a laboratory.
Is it
Eurofins, like Europe.
EURO, okay.
OFINS.
Okay,
yes.
okay, cool. And the wastewater treatment transferred septic system will meet the newest regulations of DEP regarding nitrogen?
The receiving surface water is not an
No,
impaired.
no, the wastewater treatment plant.
Yep.
That is now not going to be a wastewater treatment plant, but it's going to be a Title V septic system under DEP regulations. And
Yes.
DEP is adopting regulations to protect Cape Cod Bay from excessive nitrogen discharges, which we will all have to ramp up to. Will this facility be required to install that kind of a
The
system
proposed
for their Title
regulations
V
won't
system?
apply to this because the.
Say again?
The proposed regulations will not apply to this location because there's not an impaired estuary from
The
nitrogen.
Cape Cod Bay is impaired,
It's
considered impaired.
focusing on impaired estuaries. The regulations are reducing the nitrogen
gotta
in the
be kidding
impaired estuaries.
You're kidding, right?
Well, that's
I
where
don't
the
think he is.
nitrogen accumulates. And once you get out into the Cape Cod Bay, there's
Well, that
sufficient
is
dilution.
Cape Cod Bay.
Hmm?
It is Cape Cod Bay.
The-
Where do
the
you think
new-
that water is going? I can show you that it's going to Cape Cod Bay.
Are you talking about the nitrogen-sensitive
Yeah,
areas?
yeah.
We've identified estuaries that are impaired by nitrogen, and it's the watersheds to those estuaries that the regulations address. And this is not a watershed.
But not the place that the dead
actually,
zone exists.
I'm sorry, yep, Plymouth is on that,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you for clarifying. For Holtec,
Yes.
my friends at Holtec. They need to know.
Yes, they will, yeah.
All right, Mary?
Yes. I understood you to say that the only new source would be the spent fuel pool, but doesn't it say spent fuel pool and water from decommissioning processes?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so Mary, I don't have my copy of the NIPD's permit in front of me, but yes, there were 2 unauthorized discharge items. One is spent fuel pool water, and the other one was dewatering from decommissioning activities. That's correct.
Right.
And also, could you circulate the contacts for CZM to the entire panel?
Sure, it's public
Great.
info. You bet.
Dave?
Can you articulate, Mary, would you?
Yeah, thank you, Seth. When you,
I have just one more part of my report out for MEMA, so on the public safety part of IWG.
Yes.
So MEMA is continuing to work with local partners on public safety planning, and it's working to schedule the next quarterly work group meeting with the former EPZ communities. Okay, so any questions?
yeah, yeah, Seth.
Go ahead, Dave.
So Seth, you had mentioned that you were in discussions with Holtec about the protocol for the sampling. Did Holtec object to anything that the state proposed as part of that discussion?
No, they presented us with a draft. We went down, we did the site visit on Thursday. We're going to work out some details on what's in the draft and observations that we made during the site visit.
Okay.
So it's been cooperative.
So you're comfortable the state's getting everything they asked for as part of this discussion?
Yeah, it's really very straightforward. We're going to go to those 3 different locations. We know where they're going to take the samples from and how they're going to take them, and we just need to, we'll put that into the final protocol.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mary Gatzlick?
Thank you. Seth, you were talking about reviewing the site work plans. When are you guys going to be done with that review? Because we've been talking about this for a couple of meetings.
So they're currently with the Attorney General's office, but I'm not going to make any judgment on that because it took us a while to get them to, it took me a while to get my part to the AGO. So we're in touch with Seth Schofield about it. We'll keep working on it.
Mary Lampert?
Yes, one last question. Dave was talking about bringing buildings down to ground level. What's the requirement of how far below ground level they have to go?
They don't have to go down below ground level on any of the work that they've done so far that I'm aware of.
Not so far, but before they pack up and leave the site.
So that would depend, Mary. So
or where is it? I could read it, you know.
let me work on your question. It's gonna depend on the different elevations.
It's specified in the settlement agreement.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
Talks about
I had a-
underground, it talks
Yeah.
about underground structures, components, and the depth and how that has to be modeled.
Okay.
For your stuff, right, Jack? And then also any solid waste issues that might come back towards us?
Correct?
Yeah.
If I could, the language specific to non-radiological is no oil or hazardous material left below grade.
Yeah,
And
so
any
Mary, I
material left below
can
grade
get you
is
some
by
info
plan.
on, how the solid waste aspect of that stuff works on that part of things. Yep.
Okay, and then in the settlement agreement, I gather.
Settlement agreement, and then, the settlement agreement may go to, the requirements that are in the regulations that we
Yeah, I
we
appreciate
implement.
it, yeah.
Yep.
John and Pine, I had a question, one last
Yes,
question.
Henrietta.
Yes, this is for Gerard. This is just a follow-up to a question I had asked a couple of times by email, and you weren't sure of the answer. And I think I'm gleaning what the answer may be, but my question was, when the EPA does its review of the application that presumably will be submitted in the next few months for a new or an updated, revised NIPDES permit, will economic impact be any part of the consideration, any economic impact of discharge of water into the bay? Will that be considered in any way, shape, or form by the EPA, by Mass DEP and the EPA?
There are instances where that could be considered if the discharge is considered to be a significant discharge, and that will be part of the review of the permit application. It could be.
Thank you.
It doesn't always have to be.
I see, okay.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
Okay, moving on. Next agenda item is to review the status and schedule of the 2022 annual report from NDCAP. Mary.
Good evening, panel. Last Wednesday, you all were provided with a draft copy of the 2022 annual report. I asked for comments, and I did receive comments from a number of people last week. I received a flurry of comments today that I have not had a chance to really look at them in depth. I know that there is some concern that the report is missing a section for the NDCAP recommendations. So I would like to propose that we put a section in the report to talk about what the NDCAP recommends, since we are an advisory committee.
May I comment on that, because some of the recommendations came from me?
What was that?
Basically, I've had a number of back and forths with Ms. Gaslick over today, and starting point is, I think we have agreed that we have some fundamental disagreements as to what that report isn't required to include. Recommendations is only part of it because, frankly, the panel's never made any, at least it has not in the last 3 years. And what I think the report requires is quite different. I would hope that Ms. Gatzlik and I, over the next 2 months, and hopefully over less than that, would be able to resolve our differences, at least to the extent where we can create a report that includes what everyone thinks should be in it. But I don't think we're anywhere near ready to go to bed with this now.
It was not sent out for approval today because I'm still missing a section from the interagency work group. And the report has been based on previous reports.
It depends what report you're talking about. You and I disagree on this.
That's correct.
Let's be honest. We've agreed to disagree. Our problem now is how do we work through this? And I suggest that we spend the time between now and the March meeting, and mostly between now and early March, so we can get something out to the whole panel well in advance of that March meeting that people really have time to wrap their heads around.
That is predicated on the fact that we get comments back. I mean, having comments an hour or two before the meeting is not fair to the person who's creating the draft.
But either
all right?
is sending out a 51-page draft 3 business days before the meeting.
All right, Dave Noyes.
Thanks. The legislation, as I read it, says that the report is to advise the governor. The definition of advise is to inform someone about a fact or situation in a formal or official way. I don't see anything in advising the governor as interpreting that we need to make specific recommendations to the governor. And I do believe that a lot of discussions along that line are going to delay the report. They're going to get watered down. There's going to be differences of opinion within the panel. Are we better off just providing with the governor a factual accounting similar to what Mrs. Gatzlik's already provided?
Thank you. I mean, my idea of an annual report is just that you capture what was said in all of the meetings, presented in all of the meetings, because the governor doesn't have the time to sit down and view 18 hours worth of presentation from the NDCAP. This is our point to give him basically an idea of what's being said for the panel.
All right, Mary, and then
I do not believe the governor, the legislature, the attorney general, the general public is interested in a bare outline of what was talked, not the substance, but just the subject of what was talked about at every bloody meeting. I don't think they're interested either in a blow-by-blow of what Dave has reported. This can be linked. That's why we have the website. The reports that Dave has that are very well put together can be referenced. They can read the minutes. They can look at videos. What the people are interested in, I believe, are the issues. The issues being water, the issues being cleanup, the issues being spent fuel management issues there, the issue of finances. There have been, which is mentioned, I think, on page 8, that those are the 4 issues. But you're very hard to find any discussion of those issues in any way you can understand it. There might be a crumb in every other 10 pages, but it's not together on what the opinions expressed were, and there were many opinions. Not, I must say, 99% of Holtec's opinions, which is in the draft, which is understandable because you were tasked with Dave, and that's where your experience comes from. You could have an example, 2.5 pages of what Dr. Conca had to say about tritium. Not a peep of the other side's of the coin that was brought forward. I sent papers of what experts that said they differed. That's what you have in a scientific community, and that's what the governor, the legislature, the public should be getting. Both sides of the coin. And so that is why I appreciate, but again, we weren't trying to be pains in the neck. 3 days, that's all we had. And I'm getting my eye operated on, and I should have had it done 2 days ago. It's because of reading that.
All right, Jack.
And so that's my point. It's not balanced, and it doesn't focus on the main issues, which can be done quite easily. And so we'd love to work on it, and we can work collectively on it. Public can go in. I've looked at all the videos again for like the 4th time. And let's focus on the issues. We can do a good job. We don't have to get it out. I don't think the governor is sitting on the edge of her chair waiting to get the report.
Well, Mrs. Lambert,
Right.
it wasn't my intention to issue the report as is. This is just the first stake in the ground.
And that's
And
great.
what I
It's
talked
appreciated.
about, I went through all of the meeting minutes, looked at all of the meeting videos, and what is in that report is what we talked about during those meetings. Dr. Conica's report is been cut down to the bare bones. An easy enough way for people who are not familiar with tritium and its impact to the environment can understand.
That's very true, and so we can work from there because there are other doctors, as I mentioned, Dr. Arjun Makajani, and I had sent a lot of his material that can be added. So that's great.
Well,
All right,
So
Mary,
we can
Mary.
work on that.
Mary and Mary. So let's go to Mr. Priest and then Ms. Dubois, and then I have a couple of comments. So Jack.
And Mrs. Cosentino.
Yes, we'll get you in there somewhere.
So I appreciate the level of effort, having worked on the annual report in the first few years with Sean and Dave and company to put that together. I think we have to be a little more compromising, or collaborative might be a better word, to get a valuable document to inform a new governor of what the concerns of the panel are. So it was good to read through that draft and kind of relive all of the meetings in synopsis. I think Jim and Mary working together could get, a document out to us, a few weeks before the next meeting that would give us an opportunity to provide some comments and allow them to re-edit it and then re-present it. I do think where Mary recognizes that there's a missing section, Mary Gatzlick, that as Mary Lampert pointed out, there's really 4 areas that we've taken up a lot of time on the panel with. And I don't think from the water issue, right? So we've had, the issue was, initial communication from Holtec about their desire to release the water, that we had a lot of public concern, public and private concern about that and the impact. We've had an expert with one opinion come into the panel and do a presentation. We've had some documents providing a different opinion. And to kind of capture that, what is the state working on? The state's working with the EPA that said, hey, if you want to discharge this water, you have to have a permit to do that. And these are the things that are going to impact that decision-making on processing that permit. So I think to capture that information in a one document would be useful to the governor. To shorten the document up, I don't think Mary Lampert's idea of referencing or hyperlinking to our page where those minutes are. But I also think maybe having a short synopsis of, I don't know how many meetings we had last year, 6, 7? That we capture a shorter synopsis of those meetings. It's a little difficult to wrangle. I grant you that, having done that before. But I think those 4 topic areas that Mary talked about are important to say this is what the focus of the panel is. And our recommendation at this time could be, we're still fact-finding, we're still gathering data, and we don't have a uniform recommendation from the panel on this subject area. I don't think there'll be as much controversy about the financial impact, right? We've been monitoring the finances. Holtec reports that out monthly. That goes to the AGO. The AGO takes that information and does an assessment of, are they on target or not on target? I forgot what the other 2 were, Mary, sorry. One was water, one was finance. Cleanup status, right? We're still waiting to get through the site characterization documents by the state for comments to go back to Holtec. And I think there's a 5th one. I think we should mention the legislation and try to summarize the various bills that we saw in 2022 and what we anticipate seeing in 2023.
Yes.
Because there's some, I'd say there's some disconnect between the current bills. You know, there's a bill out there that was presented on a larger commission. Now tonight we heard about a bill with a smaller committee, and that commission was in addition to the NDCAP. So that's going to be for the legislature to sort through the various bills and conference committees and come together with some recommendations on a couple of what I think are much needed bills to help sharpen the focus of the oversight of the project. So in addition to the 4 that Mary mentioned, I think we should look at something with a legislative synopsis. So I'm looking at the document as more of a synopsis of our focus areas. I don't think we have definitive recommendations to give to the governor.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jack.
So that's to the panel, and that's open to discussion of how other panel members feel about that.
Thanks, Jack. We'll go to Henrietta.
Yes, I do appreciate what you said, Jack and Mary, and I totally agree. It is important to have the legislative efforts mentioned in this report. I just wanted to pursue a little bit more on the idea that there should be, there need not be as much elaboration on things that could be hyperlinked. And the report of the expert, the 2.5 pages devoted to Dr., I've forgotten what his name was, on tritium, need not be elaborated there. It could be synopsized, but by the same token, I think it is unfortunate that an equally important presentation, a very crucial presentation by James Lampert on the legal implications of discharging water into the bay, was given extremely short shrift, and there was no balance between those 2 synopses. That's my point. But I do recognize, Mary Gatzlick, that it's a huge amount of work, and I know that it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's not easy at all to write such a report. I would wish that it would be much, much shorter, because I don't think there's much chance that anybody will read a 51-page report, and it's going to be longer when the working group report gets added. So personally, I would think if we could reduce it to 4 or 5 pages of synopsis, that would be more useful for the governor and the legislators.
All right, Henrietta, thank you. Pine? All done. I agree with you that, so first of all, this is not neither here nor there, but I will comment. Over the years, the last 5 years, I've asked Mr. Muratori if there was ever any evidence that the prior governor had ever read the report, and nobody could ever tell me conclusively that he had. So I know we've currently gone from a he to a she, and I agree with you that you have a template in place based off of the prior reports, and we're building on that. And I want an accurate depiction of what has occurred in the 6 or 7 meetings over the course of the 6 meetings, correction, Jack, 6, over the calendar year of 2022. So I understand the effort that you've put into this, and I agree with everyone that, you can't get these 72 hours before a meeting. But I think that I'd like to put together a working group. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, Mary, we can get together and with a few other members of the committee here, and we can massage this in certain areas and maybe improve upon it, and then put a second pass out there.
That's excellent.
And do that 3 to 4 weeks before the end of March meeting, and then hopefully we'll get some more input, and then come into the late March meeting, and maybe we can have some sort of consensus,
I'm all
okay?
for, everything is hyperlinked. I'm all for taking out Appendix 1. As I was writing up Appendix 1, it's like, this is crazy. You can hyperlink each month's minutes, and if you're that interested, you can go in and look at it. So if we could get rid of Appendix 1, add the legislation thing to it, it's going to shorten it up dramatically. And I'm all for that, because that's the way a report should be written.
Okay.
Plain and simple. And everything is going to be synopsis, so you're not going to have big, long descriptions on he said, she said, basically. It's just going to be down to the I don't want to say bare bones, but down to the information that needs to be communicated, period.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Seth.
The wonders of the electronic communications. So I may have omitted an item that I've been asked to make sure that I bring to everybody's attention. If I missed this, I apologize. We talked about Holtec met with EPA and DEP, and one of the items I want to make sure that I report out is CZM and EEA are currently considering the implications of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act for state permitting of any proposed discharges by Holtec. So if I omitted that before, pardon me? I thought I did too, but, okay, so thanks. I just want to make sure. And then the last item was that we do plan on following up with meeting with Holtec in the future.
Can you just say the CZM thing again, Seth, one more time for Pine?
Yes, CZM and EEA are currently considering the implications of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act for state permitting of any proposed discharges by Holtec.
Okay. All right, we're behind schedule, but that's okay. All right, moving on to public.
Can I quickly ask, are they considering any other acts, state acts?
Well, we're looking at all the applicabilities, Mary.
All the state acts, not just
All the applicabilities, all of them.
Okay, Blue Jacket, gentlemen, thank you. Could you just introduce yourself, and let's try to keep this under, so we can get a few people up there, 3 to 4 minutes tops, please? All right, 3 tops.
Okay, should be about 3 minutes.
Okay.
First off, I want to say only U-92 can prevent climate change. My name is Brian Campbell. I'm a retired electrical engineer, and I strongly support the discharging of the treated water from Pilgrim into Plymouth Bay, into Cape Cod Bay. The scenario as reported in last meeting in September by Dr. James Conker of mixing the water with 20 times seawater and discharging slowly, no more than 40,000 gallons a day, is routinely done at nuclear plants worldwide, including Pilgrim, and with no adverse effects. Dr. James Conker presentation provided an excellent summary of radiation risk analysis that is scientifically based. The presentations by Holtec to this Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel shows Holtec to be a good corporate citizen performing the Pilgrim decommissioning in a truthful and open manner that should be commended. Instead, our Massachusetts senators and congressmen and political establishment unfairly condemned Holtec, just as they drove Entergy to prematurely close NRC licensed to 2032 Pilgrim Nuclear in 2019. This increased Massachusetts emissions by 2 million tons per year, eliminated 62% of Massachusetts' low-emission energy, and eliminated 600 mostly union jobs. Pilgrim Nuclear was replaced by new gas-fired electrical generation, such as the 2019 Cape Cod Canal 330-megawatt gas and oil-fired Unit 3. State Representative Randy Hunt of Sandwich said, "It's ironic that we have to build fossil fuel plants to make our renewable energy grid more robust. The new unit helps to fill gaps in those systems and has become more vital as Pilgrim Nuclear has now been shuttered. This is the equivalent of burning 20 Boston landmark Carita rainbow/artwork LNG tanks per year. What looked good in 2019 is now an expensive mistake." National Grid announced that its electrical customers will see a 64% increase in their electrical bills and 22% hike in their natural gas bills beginning November 1st, 2022. However, CNBC reports keeping Illinois' nuclear plants open is saving customers an average of $237 a year. As in 2021, Illinois' legislature passed funding to keep its nuclear plants open. The era of cheap natural gas is over worldwide. The favorable treatment of corporate entity Commonwealth Wind and renewable energy in general illustrates a dual standard of hypocrisy by the Massachusetts federal and Massachusetts political class. Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plans for 2030 and 2050, CECP goals state
You're at 4 minutes. How
that
we doing?
expensive offshore wind will be the backbone of our electrical system.
Thank you, sir.
And I just wanted to say that Commonwealth is up for reevaluation, but I'm sure Maura Healey will come up with the money to keep on building a useless wind out there. Thank you.
Sir, next. Down from Amesbury, right?
Yeah, that's right. You remember me from last time. My name is Chris. Thank you for giving me a hearing. My name is Chris Nord, N-O-R-D. I live in Amesbury. I have been interested in what happens down here. I've been down here off and on for the last 25 years because we have a nuclear facility, as you know, Seabrook, very close to the top of the North Shore, Massachusetts, and what happens here could well happen off the coast of Massachusetts and New Hampshire in the coming years. So that's why I'm making the following comments. First, I want to say concerning the report you all were talking about, keep the report full length and put an executive summary on the beginning of it so that they have the full report. Staffers from the senators' offices and legislators other than the governor would be interested in reading it, but have an executive summary. So as to my comments, the radioactive water that Holtec apparently feels justified to inject into Cape Cod Bay will contain some very dangerous radionuclides. Since the 1970s, research has shown that low-level radiation is more efficient at causing cell damage per dose than high-level radiation. This fact was finally acknowledged by the National Academies of Science, not a controversial organization, in 2006, when they finally stated in their BEER 7 report, that is, Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation, that there is no threshold below which radiation is not harmful. Tritium is not a low-level, minor emitter. It is a short-range emitter that is more biologically effective at causing cell damage than gamma radiation, according to Arjun Makhijani, whose name you heard earlier, PhD, and president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. I heartily recommend that he be brought in as another voice to give a different perspective about radiation. Gamma radiation is like a shotgun. Tritium's beta radiation is more like a derringer. While it cannot pass through the skin on its own, it readily bonds with oxygen to form radioactive water and thereby can enter plant and animal life forms where its short burst radiation can cause serious damage, including genetic damage. This fact is well known, and it is reflected in the tragic health effects documented in this very state as a result of the dumping of radioactive tritium from the Roe atomic plant in the Deerfield, into the Deerfield River. It will remain dangerous for more than 200 years. There is also strontium-90, a beta emitter that the living world believes is calcium. So if a lactating mother eats fish that contain strontium-90 as a result of discharging small amounts of radiation into Cape Cod Bay, she will pass that strontium-90 in her mother's milk to her child, where it will settle in the bones. When that child, 10 to 25 years later, develops bone cancer, does anyone really think that Holtec will come forward to take responsibility? Of course not, because the latency period between the insult and the advent of the disease allows the perpetrator to claim there is no proof of a link. This is why the discharge of dumping all this radiation is terrible news for so many. For Holtec, it is only one option of a set of options. That is true here, that is true off the shore of Seabrook, that is true around the United States, and it is true around the world. We do not have to dump radioactive water into our oceans. Leave the water where it is until something less damaging to our beautiful home can be found. So in closing, I'm going to say that there is a lot of good science on all sides of this issue concerning radiation and the potential for health effects, and I strongly urge this panel to make sure that there is some kind of balance in how that information is presented, so that all points of view or many points of view are given a chance to be heard, and you and the general public can make up their own minds about how this best should be handled. In the meantime, the stuff should stay right where it is.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Art?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, honorable committee members. Thank you to the community for coming and hearing this important issue. My name is Art Disloges, and I represent the Massachusetts chapter of the Sierra Club, which is the oldest and largest grassroots organization in the United States protecting our environment and standing up for environmental justice. As you know, I have addressed this panel several times. At the last meeting, I asked the panel, what is your role in this issue? Whether to discharge the 1.1 million gallons into Cape Cod Bay. Per statute, your role is to advise the governor and the general court, which includes the legislators. But what advice should you give? And on what issue? Is it the disposal of the water, or is it the redevelopment of the land? Before I answer that question, I would like to quickly recount the many voices that have spoken out on this issue. Foremost are the citizens of the community who have held many public protests on their fears of the negative impacts of this discharge. The shellfish industry has stated their fears on reputation risk. The First Parish Church has organized marches in opposition. The Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe has decried this action. The Save Our Bay Coalition and the Plymouth County Observer have warned us of the dangers. The Association to Protect Cape Cod is considering legal action. The many voices continue. Senator Markey has consistently sent his representative to these meetings echoing the community concern and the absoluteness that Holtec cannot discharge this water without the proper permits. Congressman Keating has done the same. Senator Moran has personally attended these meetings and filed legislation to put a moratorium on this discharge. State and federal agencies have added their voice and stated in writing that this discharge, Holtec requires this discharge permit. I did not hear any voice or voices concerned about the future development of the land. They were all concerned about the disposal of the 1 million gallons of water. Let me say, though, after these voices, there's one voice that's missing. It is the collective unity voice of this panel. I request that you send an emergency letter in advance of your annual report to the governor that strongly states that this community is fearful of possible harm and does not want one drop of this water discharged. Thank you.
Diane?
Yes, hi, I'm Diane Turco with Save Our Bay and Cape Town Winders. We've been coming here for we've been coming here since this panel started, but we've been coming here over a year saying no dumping in our bay, not one drop, Holtec. We've been saying that to you and you still continue to pursue discharge. I have a question for Seth and then for John, quick. Seth, you mentioned in your discussion that you spoke with Holtec, plus it was DEP, EEA, CMZ, and you talked about permitting and the NIPD's permit, water quality, and the NEPA permit. And then at the end you said, Holtec agreed to consider. You didn't say Holtec agreed to comply or to follow the law, but you said to consider. Could you?
Yeah, so what I said was the state and federal agencies provided feedback on the permit procedures presented, which Holtec has agreed to consider.
Right, okay, so they're considering it. Okay, so now I'm going to Holtec. Thank you, okay. I'm sorry, David, I called you John, sorry. Again, as of December, Holtec was saying that they were still considering discharging. The EPA had to send another letter to Holtec on December 5th to say that it was not authorized to discharge under the current NIPD's permit. On December 19th, Holtec said all water volumes will be independently processed and then combined for a single water volume for final processing treatment prior to discharge. And I also heard today, too, that the spent fuel pool water, which seems to be the pinnacle of the discussion, is already commingled with the tourist water and the separator, dryer separator? Is that correct?
The water has essentially been commingled for the life of the plant.
Okay, so can I ask you?
Water
yes.
has been
Okay.
continually processed,
Right.
used as makeup,
Right.
and ended up in different volumes in the plant.
Right, so can I ask you, when people say spent fuel pool water, is there such a thing?
There's
Anymore.
water that currently exists in the spent fuel pool.
Okay, but when people say spent fuel pool water, I think the public is assuming it's the water in the spent fuel pool, but you're talking about something different.
No, I mean, the EPA has made it very clear that the water that currently exists in the spent fuel pool, the Taurus, the dryer separator pit, and the cavity are not authorized for discharge.
Okay, so why did Holtec keep saying that they had the authority to discharge it all year? From January, from February 17th, when the EPA said the discharge was explicitly prohibited, and all the way up through December, a whole year, the EPA is telling you, you can't discharge it, but Holtec was saying they could.
We clearly had a different understanding of what the requirements were and what it is that the permit required.
Right,
It's
and we understand
very
that.
clear to us now.
Right, okay, so will you comply with the state regulations?
Yes.
Okay, because the agreement says that Holtec shall comply with Chapter 21E, and in Chapter 21E, hazardous materials, radioactive characteristics are considered hazardous materials, and it prohibits hazardous materials from being discharged into our waterways. The threat of discharge is also illegal in that law. And so, Seth, is the state looking at employing 21E? That was specifically mentioned in the settlement agreement.
So we're not looking at the water that is in the reactor systems as being applicable to 21E.
Why?
Gerard, can you help me out with that one? Gerard's my 21E he's the 21E guy in my group.
So 21E covers releases to the environment of oil and hazardous material and radioactive material but on other programs, if it can be discharged under other programs safely, there's no notification requirement under 21E. So, but as we talked about earlier, as part of the permitting process, and we mentioned MEPA, MEPA does have all the state agencies look at this and identify what's applicable.
Okay, so right here, and I'm just going to follow up with this. In the settlement agreement, page 11, Holtec shall comply with 21E. So it sounds like that agreement with Holtec, they comply, and you can't have an exemption to that because this is the agreement they signed. Holtec shall comply with all applicable environmental and human health-based standards and regulations of the Commonwealth. Holtec shall comply with 21E. So do they get a buy on that?
If it is a permanent discharge, it is allowed, and 21E doesn't cover permanent discharges. Okay? 21E is for, accidental, unpermitted releases.
And there are other aspects of the site cleanup,
Wow.
Diane, that
Yeah.
are subject to 21E.
Yeah, wow. Okay, this is a big game going on here.
All right, Diane,
Yeah.
all right, you're at 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Quintal?
Oh, just one, how do we know Holtec isn't dumping now? I meant to ask, just quick.
I don't have that, I don't know.
David, how do we know you're not dumping now?
Because I told you I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone tonight. My name is Paul Quintal, and I have operated passenger vessels upon the Massachusetts waters for 50 years. I'm also a long-term member for the Plymouth Harbor Committee and a member of the Mass Lobstermen's Association and Plymouth Lobster Association as well. I have attended all of the NDCAP meetings during the past 16 months. I have tried to keep an open mind by listening and trying to learn and understand the consequences of dumping radioactive waste into Cape Cod Bay. I have also increased my knowledge with a better understanding of tritium, bioaccumulation, but the term half-life still confuses me. I do not know what I want. I do know I want microorganisms, fish, crustaceans, whales, Plymothians, and all residents of Massachusetts to have a full life. There are dozens of Massachusetts towns from Cape Cod and the southeast Mass that have gone on record voting against spent pool water and any dumping. Many of the people in this room only represent the hundreds of thousands of residents that oppose your potential plan to dump. I will close with one question that you folks have not heard, and I would try to have Holtec respond to this if you possibly could. My question is, does Holtec consider the public's thoughts, feelings, ideals, in strong opposition to the dumping of any pool water into Cape Cod Bay?
Yes, we absolutely do.
Thank you.
Joanne? And then we'll have one more after that.
Joanne Corrigan, I live around the corner from Pilgrim at Priscilla Beach. And I did have a little speech I wanted to give, but then I got sidetracked when Muratori got up here with that idea of getting the state involved after saying they never wanted to touch anything at Pilgrim. And if you recall, it's the state that got us here behind the 8 ball where we are right now, because they gave Boston Edison, don't shake your head, they gave Boston Edison carte blanche to do whatever they wanted over there, and the state wasn't going to touch them or control them in any way. Unlike Vermont, there might be a bunch of pot-smoking, tree huggers, but they had enough sense to give their legislature the final say in what went on at the plant, whether it was renewing their license or anything else, and not one drop of radioactive water went into the Connecticut River. It got hauled away like it should here. It was hauled away. And don't try to tell me that it's better to just dump it, because we all know it isn't. And like all the fishermen say, the perception, just the perception of radioactive water in fish, lobsters, clams, every shellfish, it's unbelievable. Just that alone. And then forget the tourism involved in the real estate values. But to get the state involved, when he himself said they never wanted to touch it, and then when he said he'd been studying the plant since 2005, well, I've been here coming here since 1947. And when the plant went in, they gave Boston Edison free range to do what they want, which is why we're here today arguing. So to get the state involved and get all these people who don't even live here, who have no skin in the game, as they put it, involved in making the decisions is ludicrous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I can't believe he wouldn't even bring it up. And he does not represent the people of Plymouth. If he did, he would have looked you two in the eye and said, absolutely do not dump this radioactive water. And he didn't have the backbone to say that to you. But I'm saying it to you.
Thank you, Joanne.
But that wasn't my speech. I wanted to talk about the tritium expert that you guys sent here from the West Coast. I hope he didn't fly him first class and spend a lot of money, because all he did was put everybody in a catatonic state after about 12 minutes. He wasn't speaking to the International Brotherhood of Nuclear Engineers. He was speaking to lay people. And I've got an X-ray background, and this guy put me into a comatose state. Anyhow, and when I just looked at his so-called expert testimony, what he was using was data from 1975. 1975, even with my poor math skills. I know that's almost 50 years ago. And that's what he was using to back up his report. Now, my question to Holtec is, you couldn't find an engineer or a so-called tritium expert at MIT, BU, Northeastern, 50 miles north of here, and have him come down and try to convince us how great it is?
Or
and
her.
it's going to make our skin soft? Anyway, thank you. But keep the state out of it.
Okay, thanks, Joanne.
My name's Ryan Collins, and I grew up right down the beach. I just want to say a few words. So, first off, thank you, members of the NDCAP, for the work you are doing. And thank you as well to the Holtec representatives for being here today. And also thank you to all the members of the public who have chosen to attend tonight. And I appreciate this opportunity to say a few words, and I promise it will be less than 3 minutes. We tend to emphasize the bad news, and unfortunately there's a lot of it, but there is some good news as well, and I just want to cover some of that. When my father and my uncles were growing up on the shores of Manomet, just a couple miles south of the Pilgrim plant, They played witness to the construction of the power plant and watched as the lush green coastline, which my father described as paradise, was turned into an industrial no man's land. Today, thanks to Holtec, we have begun dismantling this eyesore and hopefully cleaning up the mess which my generation has inherited and that future generations to come will also inherit. I am most thankful that the decommissioning of this plant has begun, and I also appreciate Holtec's expertise in ensuring this project is done in a responsible manner. Tonight, I have heard many intelligent statements being made about what is legal and what is not legal. I have also heard many intelligent statements being made about nuclear science, pollutants, and chemistry. Nevertheless, there is something here tonight in this room that is more important than the law. There is something here tonight in this room that is more important than the science. The people here tonight in this room, along with the tens of thousands of residents of Plymouth and Cape Cod, and the millions of tourists and visitors who visit this area each year, have made it clear that we would prefer for this water to not be released into our beloved Cape Cod Bay. The wishes of people, the real human beings who live here in the shadow of the nuclear plant, in my personal opinion, ought to supersede the law and the science, as well as the permits. This past Christmas Day, my father-in-law, Steve Blacker, who is like a second dad to me, passed away unexpectedly. I was with Steve when he died. And since that experience, I've been thinking more about the legacy we leave behind when we die. My question to you, David, John, and your CEO, Krishna, and the rest of Holtec is this. Will your legacy as individuals and as a company be one in which you are remembered by us and the future generations to come as the company who ignored our simple request? Or will you, David, John, and Krishna, and the rest of Holtec, leave behind a legacy in which you are remembered by us and the future generations of Plymouth and Cape Cod as the company that listened and acquiesced to our collective wish and desire that you take this water elsewhere? The people of Plymouth and Cape Cod have made it clear to you that we do not want the water discharged into Cape Cod Bay. My hope in speaking to you tonight is that when you are lying in bed, you will remember my words and consider what I have said. After all, and I feel this is important for all of us to remember, on the day they lay your body down to bury you, there will be no pockets in the pants that you are wearing. You can't take your money with you. All you can do is leave behind your legacy. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor of adjournment? Okay. Thank you, the ayes have it. See you in March. All right.